went to the Chicago Computer Society, the second edition of Linux. We had a Linux SIG many years ago, and we're reviving it. So it's Linux SIG 2. I am the host, Jerry Sass, and Tim Kaikis is the presenter. I'm going wild here, getting incoming calls. But a lot of the information, I think, we kind of covered some of the things, a little bit beforehand. Hopefully, let's recover some of that because some people came in a little late. So, Tim, take it over.
Okay. Welcome, everybody, to the second coming of the CCS Linux SIG. It was originated back in 2006 by Arun Khan, and within a year or so, he had family problems and that back in India, so he had to return there, and it kind of fell apart at that point. So we haven't had such a group for a long time, and partly because myself, even though I played with it and I knew Bob was playing with it, we were probably the only two in CCS I knew of that was interested in it. So maybe things have changed a little bit. Again, I want to repeat, if you're a newbie to this, I would really like to hear an email from you with your full name and what equipment you intend to use, preferably a separate system from whatever you're using to access the Zoom accounts, which I'm assuming for many of you is Windows, just like I am right now. You're seeing me on a Windows 11 system. I'm an insider. But offhand, I also have a second machine here, which I'll be using, that has Zoom on it as well, and it's Linux Mint. Now, at the present time, we are in the fourth week of the month on a Tuesday night. I'm not saying for our group that this is etched in stone yet. So another thing I need from all of you is feedback. Right now, the second week, Tuesdays and Thursdays, and the fourth week of a month, Tuesday and Thursday, are the desirable days to have the meeting. The next issue is that if we especially decide to do our meetings in the fourth week, you have the upcoming holidays in November and December. Most people do not want to try and split what they're doing with family and something like these meetings. So we usually reschedule it anyhow, or we cancel it. And 2 months in a row would be a little devastating. So, but if we choose to keep the fourth week as the mainstay, probably we will, in November and December, switch to the second week for a meeting on those 2 months. If anybody has opinions, etc., you can use the chat to state what you think we should be doing as far as that goes. If the start time, if something different than what I scheduled for tonight is desirable, that's also a possibility as well. Right now, we have a few constraints as to when we can realistically hold the meetings. And so I want to try and make it the day and time the best for the majority of people. I'm pretty much open on this stuff. For those who are not members of CCS, you may or may not know that offhand, I also create on the CCS website the news and tips of articles I mine, and I post as many days as I can of the week. I can't do every day like I used to. Just don't have enough time without doing without sleep, which I don't think will happen for very long. So at the moment, what I am going to try and do here, if I can manage it. All right. Everybody ought to be able to see that. And most of what you're seeing there, you're seeing on the side of the screen, probably a double black rectangle on the right side. And that's because on this machine, I have Zoom running. And that way, as you can see, I have Zoom. I installed Chrome browser. Besides the standard Firefox that's in most distros, unless they're super light. But this one down here is Microsoft Edge. They only have beta and developers versions. That means they can be a little buggy, but I've had quite good success in being able to bring up Chrome Edge and see what the heck's going on. So really, it's quite usable even at this point in time. Exactly when they're going to have a version that is not beta or developer's version, I don't know. But I did developers and beta also on Windows before it came out. Now on the desktop, normally with Windows, I have lots of icons. I'm trying to minimize my icons on Linux. But down at the bottom, you'll see here that there are 17 updates available. On Linux Mint and many other distros, they have a shield. If it's a solid shield, there are no known updates, but it takes a few minutes after you log in to Linux Mint to have it go out and check for new updates. Now, because it's a half shield at the moment, that means that there are updates available. And this is the update manager, which is showing you various categories of updates that are available. Firefox is one of them. You got a Linux kernel out here. That's very important because Linux and all OSs have a kernel. And the kernel is the majority of the operating system, and everything else is an add-on. That includes your own applications. Apparently, there's also a little bit in Cinnamon, some libraries, repository mirrors. They probably changed something. And one thing that when you first come up, if it shows a solid shield and you're a little impatient to find out if there's updates, just click on it, bring this up, hit the refresh button, and guess what? If there's any updates available, they'll populate in here. And the next thing you have to do is hit the install the updates. And this quite often comes up. This is extra headers and modules that are required for meeting dependencies of installed packages. So I have to give this thing, oops, wrong keyboard. Playing with 2 machines, 2 keyboards, and 2 mice. A lot of fun. Hang on 1 second here. Nuts. Lost the cursor. I'm typing for nothing. All right. If I find that unlike Windows, it tries to do everything at least once a month, if not twice a month, they tend to come out very sporadically in the Linux distros. So usually about once a week or once every 2 weeks, unless I'm unable to get to my other distros, I try and check out for updates. And right now, the machine that's running is a Core i3 Dell 3010 SFF, which is a slim profile desktop type computer. It's low power, being an i3. But as you can see, it does pretty good. It's got 8 gigs of memory, and I have a solid-state drive. And the solid-state drive I'm using is nothing to write home about. I'll put this up to the camera. These are way back the earliest solid-state discs that I ever got. They were cache drives for old spinning hard drives to improve performance of spinning hard drives. I haven't used them in years, and I thought to myself, I use a lot of small drives for test purposes. So what the heck, I'll give it a shot and see if I can make these work. And I found I had to do 2 things. They work. Nothing to write home about. The read speed's not too bad, but the write speed is terrible. You're talking the equivalent of a SATA 1 throughput, which is about 1.5 gigabytes per second, and versus SATA 3, which is 6 gigabytes per second. And it's makes a world of difference. So when it's writing stuff out, it takes longer to do it than it would on a regular solid-state drive like I've got on most of my other systems. But as you see, it does work. And it's only 32 gigabytes in size. You can do quite a bit in as little as 32 gigabytes of space. I have on here, and I'll show you as soon as this gets done here. I hope it doesn't ask me to do a reboot. With a kernel in there, odds are it's going to want to reboot. But I won't reboot it at this time. I'll do it later. With a lot of updates that may come in at any given time, the probability is a good percentage of them you're not going to have to reboot. It just installs the software and you go on about your work without a reboot. Very few times does that happen on Windows, trust me. Okay, yeah, it wants to reboot, and the reboot's because of the kernel that was in that list. I'm going to just close this, and when I shut down, it'll do exactly what it needs to be done. The other thing, like on Windows, you have a start button called LM over here on the left side. But I also want to point out that on some distros that you may come across, there may be a button down over on the bottom right also for power options, for shutting down, restarting, logging out, et cetera, et cetera. You also have a lot of distros like Ubuntu that have a whole bunch of bars on the top. But usually the upper right is where it has most of the system stuff that is currently on my bottom right side. I'm going to bring up the menu here, and the left-hand column has some slight similar characteristics to Ubuntu's bar. But offhand, you have all the major categories of your software broken into two columns. This is your genre. What area do you want to get into? And all applications list in this column here everything that's installed on your system. A lot of that is native stuff. Under Internet, the Chrome that's there, the Microsoft Edge, and Zoom are ones I added. So you can get quite a bit done. Administration is another area, and I want to show you this briefly. We're not going to get into it in depth this session. And I love, this is something else you're going to have to get used to. For many of you users, this is the equivalent of on Windows of UAC, and you have to give the administrator's password. And by the way, when it comes to administrator password, most of the Linuxes I've played with only require one. And that is the one you logged in with. That's the administrator. I goofed up. I'm trying to talk and do this at the same time. Oh, now, wait a minute. Oh, this is looking for the root. And I set that to be the same, which I usually don't. Hang on a minute. That's the other thing. On some Linuxes, when you're doing the setup, it's required that, or they usually say recommended, that you, there we go. What you do is set up in a real root administrator's password. So you have two passwords. And right now, this one, I had to have two for some other reason that I don't remember right now. And right now, I'm having trouble remembering what I set this thing as. I'm not that worried about it. All I was going to do was show you something. Well, I may have been pressing the wrong button. Let's back that up. I did it again. I'll try one more time here. Nope. Nuts. All right. Well, I can't show you today. I'll have to get that set up again. But in general, gparted is a partition package. If you're unfamiliar with a partition package, all it is a way of being able to divvy up your drive space that you are allocating for an operating system into as many pieces as you need and whatever size each piece may be. The easiest analogy I have is think of my 32 gigabyte drive here as a pie. Now, there's a lot of people who like pecan pie during the holidays, but it's very, very rich. So a lot of people only have a small, thin slice to get the taste of it, while other people don't care about how filling it is. They go for larger pieces. And that's basically what I have here. I have 3 pieces on my drive. I have a swap file, which raises 2 issues. I have mine at the beginning, but some people feel it's best to put it at the end of the drive area so that it can be resized if they need to at some point in time. Then I have a root partition. Right now, I'm only allocating 15 gigabytes. Whatever's left on the drive, that small, is my home directory. And another way of kind of looking at it, you just don't get quite the image that G. Parted would have given, is the following, is this is kind of like a file explorer and the various folders that are out there on your system, and anything attached to the network would list down here. I have under file system, this is every folder that is in the root directory, root partition, pardon me. And as you can see, there are quite a few of them out there. The boot, which Bob brought up earlier, is here. But if I had Red Hat or a few of its sibling OSs, it would be a case where I might have to, if I use the BTFS file system in the partition, I'd have to move this into its own separate partition, and it's not very big. Probably a gig. Swap files, the size of them are generally speaking similar to the specifications for Windows. Windows and Linux like anywhere up to 2 times the amount of physical memory in the machine. That I think personally is a bit excessive, so mine is smaller than 1 times the amount of memory I have in the machine. That was my personal choice, and so far it's served me fine. The home directory, this is where you have your desktop, whatever icons are up there. And right now, it doesn't show you the 2 that are here on the desktop because they're part of the system. If I create new icons on the desktop, maybe for program access, et cetera, then they would start appearing in here. If I up arrow here, I have a documents, which has nothing in it. I can tell you that right now. Downloads, just like Windows has a download folder. There's my Chrome, there's my Edge, but you don't see Zoom. Zoom does its own little installation that's pretty native in its characteristics. Then you have music, pictures, which have nothing on mine. Public, which is for sharing files with other nearby computer systems wirelessly, if you have that capability. Templates for a variety of things, including like for word processor, you might have various templates for different work you want to do, and videos that you may download to your system. Offhand, outside of that, these just repeat here, giving you the individual view, much like File Explorer in Windows. And for those of you who may not be that deep into Windows, I'm taking that route for a lot of the newbies, because the newbies are probably from Windows systems and very few from Mac. But I won't rule them out as far as that goes. So, and you also have a recent. Now, that's equivalent to quick access that shows in the main body here when you first bring up File Explorer in Windows. And then you have the trash can, which is quite often hidden in Windows File Explorer, but you have access to it if you've got it on your desktop. A lot of Linux systems do not have it on the desktop. It can be put there.
Okay, we're back.
Okay. Oh, Donna, you got a question?
I'm unmuting, yes. Just real quick, when you talked about physical memory, is that the RAM?
Yes, RAM memory.
All right, thank you.
If you're using a swap file or a page file like in Windows, that's virtual memory. And adding the two together gives you the total memory the computer believes you have. Somebody's really moving on the keyboard. All right. That gives you a little idea there. Now, there's a couple other gotchas that were my own quirks. Others may have the same quirk. Other people may not care. But generally speaking, if you come up here and you go to preferences, you have the date time. Now, I don't know about you, but when you installed it, you were supposed to give the time zone for your system. I don't like the map really, because Chicago is farther west of the lakes than it ought to be. It's showing in approximately the correct location here, but when you're installing it, it's farther west, and I haven't understood why. The next thing that people may want to change is it always defaults to a 24-hour clock. If you're used to military time, go for it. I personally turn it off so it goes to a 12-hour clock in the AM and PM. And I also display the date, which is usually off initially. Now, I'm not trying to confuse anything, but in some other distros, you would be changing the clock in a similar fashion. However, Bob, I think it's your keyboard that I'm hearing.
Just a sec.
Offhand, in other distros, to get your time to appear on the what we in Windows call the sys tray area down here at the bottom, you have to also go to another tool to called the panel. And I don't remember this one having the panel, but I might be wrong. Sometimes I have, oh yeah, we got a panel. Okay. Panel has also the ability, like the new Windows 11, to change where your panel at the bottom, which is these icons down along the bottom here on the left, to central like a Mac, or to the right side like I've seen a few Linux distros. But also here in the panel of some versions, you have a setting you have to change to be able to display the clock properly. Otherwise, it keeps showing you the 24-hour clock if you change it to a 12-hour clock in the date time settings. Fortunately, that's not true in Mint. But if you're one of the people here in the group that have a different distro, you may have to go to the panel on that distro to change that 24-hour clock to the 12-hour clock. And it's done by code. You have a percent sign with numbers or letters that you have to put in. And I haven't figured them all out, but I've done a pretty good guess job on all mine that I had to do the same thing on. Now, at the moment, let's get up here again. We've covered doing an update, and we've covered being able to do a few other pieces of software. But this one is showing you here BleachBit, and it has two versions. BleachBit is what I added, and it has some similarity to CCleaner on Windows. But there are two versions here. BleachBit here is for basically the standard user's account information, which is who I'm signed in as. As root, it cleans out the whole system. And I'm going to bring up BleachBit here. And it starts off with some preferences. So far, I've left them alone. I haven't dug into what I want them to do. And it gives you lots of categories. Now, if I click on the top one of a category, it checks off everything underneath it. Or I can come down here and under deep scan, I'll click the one, and it'll put a check mark in there, and it put one in the major category. But I have to check off each individual one I want if I don't want it to blow away everything that's out there. Then you have evolution. This is kind of a clone of Outlook on the desktop under Windows. I never got into it. I have done a little Thunderbird in the past, but it's been a long time since I've even done Thunderbird. I do web-based mail, but you have Firefox, there's Chrome. Journal D is part of System D, which some people don't like for seems like quite a variety of reasons, but in any case, there's nothing perfect, and nobody likes everything about any distro of Linux, Windows, or Mac. There's always people that do not like change. As a result, no matter what you throw at them that's new, they don't like it. And there's nothing you can do about it. So you have a bunch of different categories. And basically when you're done, you hit the clean button up here, and it runs pretty quickly. I'm going to just run with what I did there. It wants to confirm you're going to delete this stuff permanently that you had marked off. Anything in red, it found but did not delete. In most instances, you have to do this as the root BleachBit, and it will go through everything. But it did find really just what they call errors on the standard desktop, which basically means that all this stuff in red, the only way to deal with it that I have found so far is if I get out of BleachBit for the standard user and go into BleachBit for root, then it will work as advertised. I hate it when the mouse does that. But this looks identical to the other BleachBit. The difference is when you log into it by running it, you have to give the administrator's password or it won't work. And this on my system, I actually have a different root password than I have for the login of the standard user. So in a sense, I've got 3 different levels. Standard user is anything you can run that it doesn't challenge you for a password. Then you have the local, I'm going to call it administrator of the system. And then you have the super user of the system, which is just plain known as root. So these are a few of the things that we'll get into. And that starts raising, I guess, the next thing that we need to consider talking about. Since some of you are not on a running version of Linux, how we go about getting you on Linux will be the next topic. We got to figure out how we're going to work out a timeline. I can also try and get some of you, primarily newbies that don't have a running Linux system, up and running in between the main meetings. And that way we can have maybe 1 or 2 small sessions, just like we're doing right now, primarily just for the newbies to get a working running system up and going. And I have to show you how to take and get various components put together so that you can install it on the other machine while working on the machine perhaps that you are looking at this Zoom conference on a different machine. Because I'm assuming most of you newbies will be on Windows. And that way you keep that going and you have another system just like I have here that you would load up Linux Mint on, and then I can show you how to put in Chrome, Microsoft Edge, Chromium, how to modify the clock and date, put in Zoom, and a few other odds and ends, and at least then you would be able to even join the Zoom meetings on a Linux desktop like I am and Bob are, and a few of the others like Mike Ungerman it likely is, and maybe Jeff out of Long Beach, I think Mike said. So these are kind of the things we got to look at and try and figure out how we're going to approach all this in the group. main meeting, or if we're going to try and tackle this on the side with the newbies and go from there. Okay, I got a question here from Donna. Can the sessions be videotaped? It would be great to see it again. I think I'm trying to create a video right now. Jerry might be also. And so far, for me, I've got to see the quality of the video that I'm trying to create on this Windows desktop and see how good it looks, I guess is the way it amounts to. Then we got to figure out a delivery system based upon the size of the file. We don't have the resources of APCUG where they have a YouTube account that they can post the videos on. I also didn't catch the first couple minutes of this meeting. I almost forgot to turn on the recorder. Now, I also have in here MX Linux has such an option, formerly Memphis Linux or Anti-X Linux. And this is to reference to System D, which Bob doesn't like to use.
No, it's not that I don't like to use it. I'm just saying there are Linuxes that do have the option of not using it. And this is something you find throughout Linux. If you don't like something, usually you can find a Linux that doesn't have it. If you don't like Wayland, you can find a Linux that doesn't use it. If you don't like certain other things, GNOME, for example, which is very common, you can find Linuxes that use a different desktop.
When it comes to different desktops, usually most distros, unless they're the real light versions, come with 2 or 3 desktops, and it's easy to switch between them. However, all the other desktops, there's at least 18 to 24 of them out there. You can find and download and install them on your system and have the type of desktop you want, from a heavyweight like GNOME and KDE down to extremely featherweight distros that are barely a graphical interface. But Bob, you brought up one other thing that I was going to try and remember to touch upon, and you triggered that memory, so I'll let you explain it.
What do we got?
And that's Wayland.
Wayland is a graphics compositor. Now, this differs from a desktop environment. It's one of the units that lies underneath the desktop and just simply creates the GUI experience. It is one of these things that links your hardware to your software layer. And as a result of how Wayland works, the older one was Xorg. Mm-hmm. Because of how Wayland works, there are some limitations on what you can do in some distros, because they've been moving a lot of what used to be done at the kernel level outward into what they call the shell level. And some distros don't have shell level support for things like screen sharing, which we're doing tonight. Some do, some don't. Ubuntu, at least the 2004 version, is not good at sharing. It can't do it under Wayland, but it can do it under Xorg. So these are other kinds of considerations. So if something's newer, you may not be able to do everything under it that you are used to doing. But if something's older, it may not have the newer features.
Yeah, it's kind of a crossroads right now. Some are picking up the Wayland motif, so to speak, and it seems to be a direction that they may go in the future. It's just a case where you have to understand it's almost like betaware right now. It's still very early in development. So right now, the majority of Linux distros prefer the Xorg type of screen layout, and sharing will be an issue on Wayland, at least for the time being, mostly because you have things like Zoom, and you may not be able to do it with Zoom. Excuse me for 1 second here. Donna,
Yeah.
you got a question? Donna?
Yes, I had to unmute. I think somebody has two computers next to each other, and it seems to be when you're speaking, we get this really high noise. I just thought maybe the volume should get turned off on one when you go to the other. Perhaps that would solve that issue. But the other one you didn't cover is if before we install this upgrade to Mint, you said we need to back up the Linux install. And I don't, so it's not that snapshot thing that we do when we first install it. So what kind of a backup are you recommending? I mean, someone talks about swap file. I don't even know if my hard drive has a swap file partition. I don't think so. And a root, well, might have a root, and then everything else is open. Anyway, so we're supposed to back it up before we install this upgrade to 20.2. How do we back it up? Or what's your suggestion to back it up?
Okay, there's a lot of schools of thought on it. Right now, most of my systems, I use Macrim Reflect, but I don't know if Macrim Reflect will work on Linux. I haven't experimented with it yet, but it works on Windows, and most of my systems are sharing Windows and Linux. So I can back up the entire drive no matter what's out there in OSs. I've got one system that has two drives. There's Windows on both drives, and there is at least 4 distros of Linux, different distros of Linux on those 2 drives. But with the Macrim Reflect and some other ones, you have to back up each drive separately. I also recommend very strongly you must do verified backups. A lot of people long ago, they would back up, and then suddenly one day they need the backup and find out it didn't work right, and they've got nothing. And you always try and have a minimum of the last 3 backups. It's called the grandfather, father, son backup methodology. If you have more than the 3, that's fine, especially with all the bad things happening out on the internet. It makes life a whole lot simpler. And I'm not joking about that, because at least, even though you would lose a lot time-wise, let's say you had to go back to the 5th version of your backup, that could have been 6 months ago or more. Anything you changed in that 6-month period of time would be gone unless you have it independently backed up, like to a thumb drive with your personal files, such as a Word document, Excel spreadsheets, et cetera, et cetera. Generally speaking, there are a number of different packages I'm just starting to look at on Linux-only type systems, which I don't have a lot of. There's also a feature in Linux. Come on. Oh, wrong mouse. 2 keyboards, 2 mice. Enough to drive you nuts. Actually, I normally do not take and have 2 systems, especially different systems, running simultaneously at, like this, but I have worked on as many as 5 by rotating through them, doing whatever it is I'm trying to do. Now I'm trying to.
Well, we're no longer getting that sound of two computers running both volumes. So that's much better.
Something did happen in my system and it stopped happening. I don't know.
I don't
It
either.
adapted.
Whatever. Now, under administration in Mint, you have what's called time shift. Mac has much the same thing. Windows does too. It's called a restore point. And basically speaking, and I've only started playing with this one a little bit, it has some potential gotchas. For example, the very first time you bring it up, one of the things you can change to do is it'll back up everything you got right now instantly. But I didn't take the time yet, and part of this is because this is a deliberate test system that I'm showing you here on a 32 gigabyte hard drive. And this would take up a lot of space. And right now, I don't know if I can put it off onto a regular external backup drive. As an example, like this, hopefully you can see what I'm showing you there. This is an external 2.5-inch drive with a USB cable. I've got somewhere between 9 and 12 of these drives because I have so many different machines. And I have as many different machines on each of the drives and that. And it's a case where I always take and create a folder for each machine that I am backing up on an individual drive that clearly identifies that machine, and then I put the backups into that folder. Now with Macro and Reflect and many of the other pieces of software, and I don't think I can show you in any way, shape, or form the Macro and Reflect that I use under Windows, which is odd because Macro and Reflect came from a Linux environment and was ported to Windows. And that's the key thing with today's machines. Software is becoming cross-platform. Microsoft has been developing for Mac for a lot of years and now is getting into Linux as well. A lot of software we run on Windows and Mac come originally from the Linux world. It's getting to be a homogenized kind of environment. There are differences between each OS platform's version, potentially, like Office in Windows, Office in Mac. There are differences there that take advantage of your different OS environment. But time shift gives you the ability to make snapshots, and time shift is one of the tools I've been exploring a little bit when I get a chance, and there hasn't been a lot of that lately. It's a case where right now I wouldn't worry about it. I've never had a crash yet on Linux. Oh, hey, wait a minute. Okay, that's an option too. Mike Ungerman from the Central Florida group just posted the fact that normally in Macro Reflect on Windows, under the top menu, Other, the first item is to create a rescue media. And all you need is something that holds 400 megabytes. I know because I have a 512 megabyte flash drive, and it fits perfectly on there with a little bit of space left for something else if I want to. With it, you can boot up almost any computer and you can back up that computer, though when it first comes up, it shows you restore mode. So all you have to do is go in the upper left area, click it, the tab for backup instead of the restore that defaults, and you can run backup from there to an external drive that you otherwise would be restoring from, and create a complete disk image. 100%. And you can individually restore the individual partitions, but normally you would not. You would restore most of the time the entire image to the same system. And that's for a free version. If you want incremental differential backups and the ability to restore individual folders and files, you have to have a licensed version, and it will let you do all the extra features. Personally, I've never found such a need in my environment, but everybody's environment is very different, and you have to judge for yourself whether you need it or not. And for example, Ned, I have a brother that restore points is not enough for him on Windows, and that's all he knows. Time shift and timeline in the Mac might work if they'll back up his personal stuff. But I don't even know that to be the case yet. I have to do some experimenting. I am not a heavy person into what users are used to having discussions about. I'm the hardware guy, the operating system, and mostly the utilities to keep a system running smoothly and backed up. But I haven't gotten to the backup yet on the Linux. Bob, you got your hand up.
Yes. Now, if you want, I'm going to make a little mention of the most traditional tool that is used to take snapshots of Linux. Okay. And it is called Clonezilla. And it can be made into a live USB, just like Macrim Reflect. Macrim Reflect operates out of Win, RE, or Linux, depending. But Clonezilla Live is a Linux backup environment, but it is command line, very DOS-like. Once you get used to the DOS-like things and what it means by the things that it's asking, you have a good amount of control over which partitions you're backing up and versioning them and everything like that. And I have had it restore perfectly, and I've had it fix up things that were munged. I also back up with the Linux any EFI boot partition that is native to the machine, because EFI boot will change as you do your upgrade. And there are certain other things that may change depending on if you have other partitions. Usually, if you get EFI and Linux root, if you're only using root and you're not using these extra partitions, you're fine. The other thing I will do, because files within it may need to be restored, is I will back up my home partition by either dd copy, rsync, or just copy. Just make a copy.
Sure.
And there may be certain configuration files that may live elsewhere, but I'll just pick those out as I modify them and make a backup copy of each before I change it. Because I do edit some of the system files.
Okay, what is an EFI?
It's just the boot. It's just the machine boot file, not your Linux boot.
It's that one little folder, that boot folder.
Yeah, it'll usually say EFI on it, but it may say system. It may say something else.
Yeah, it's prevalent to all the Windows-based PC systems. They introduced it, I think, around 2012 or 13, something like that. And this is where your external tag on a Windows machine disappeared because they have the license number on a chip on the motherboard. And UEFI tries to play hardball with other OSs like Linux, but there are ways around that.
Tim, that's secure boot. That's not the UEFI.
Well,
UEFI is the replacement for the BIOS.
They work together.
Yeah.
So it's really, you're backing up both. The EFI is usually the first partition, sometimes called a system tool or something like that. I can't remember the exact verbiage. And but it's usually the very, very first partition on a drive like the dual boot system you have that has Windows and Linux Mint. So it's just, and it doesn't have a drive letter. You don't see it unless you do some special things to try and assign a letter. There's two other partitions at least, sometimes three other partitions besides the C partition. They don't have any drive letters either unless you do some special things to get a drive letter assigned to them. And there's no need to, because generally speaking, they're not for you to get into at all. They are part of the operating system environment, and it's hands off. But they have to be backed up when you do back up. You do not back up just the C partition on a Windows system. To do so, you negate the EFI and any of the other partitions that may be pertinent, which includes the recovery tools when your Windows system runs into problems. So that's why you have to back up the entire drive as a single image. Go ahead.
Yeah, and all I'm saying is that with Clonezilla, you select what you are going to back up. And for most beginners, if you've got a PC that's got just Linux on it, check off everything.
Yeah, I agree. Now with Clonezilla, I used that years ago, and I used it quite successfully. But it gave me then, I don't know if it still does, a graphical environment, so to speak, a menuing system.
Menuing.
What you want to do.
Menus.
Yeah, it's menus, but it's graphical compared to just looking at the stark command line screen, which is...
yeah, it's a step up from pure command line.
That's
a step up.
Pure command line.
Yeah.
So if I go like...
yeah.
Oops, wrong keyboard.
Do the right keyboard. I'm not saying that it's pure command line, but it looks a lot more like this than Macrim Reflect does.
Now, see, I put in a command to do an update. Update is just going out to the repositories to find out updated list of what may have changed. And it wants the password. Linux really loves this.
Yep. This is one thing that should be pointed out. Security is built in by design in Linux.
It has parallels with Windows too, unless you're one of the Windows users that has found out how to turn off UAC. And that could be a big problem from a security standpoint of your system.
Yeah. On the other hand, not to get into too many details, but Linux does get a lot more specific about permissions than Windows does.
Oh, yeah.
And that can trip you up when you're trying to do things.
That's right. And like I said, even tripped me up here a little bit in the sense that sometimes it asks for the password, And sometimes you got to look because it's not taking it, and it's saying root password. And you got to be able to put in the root password for that action to take place, like BleachBit for root.
I have had only one system where there was a distinction that had to be made, but by optionally, you can make a distinction.
Well, I've got 2 or 3 systems at least. They're all Arch, I believe, that require 2 separate passwords, and it can be a little bit of a pain in the butt. But I keep a journal of all my machines and the master passwords and user passwords, etc. That's something else we haven't done on any of the Linux systems for the groups I have joined, like APCUG, Central Florida, etc. And it's a case where I don't have that much of a need for anything other than the account I log into. And that includes on Windows. But in all systems, they give you the ability to create additional users, such as Donna and Kenneth might have a desire to have separate desktops. They have separate folders with their names on it in the home directory, whether it's a separate home directory or a root install, which is called the single partition install.
Yeah.
Right now, also, too, it means that when you're in the single one, Linux is creating the equivalent of a swap file inside that partition in a manner similar to Windows page file, but it's a temporary thing that it keeps recreating every time you run the system. It doesn't stay there like the page file in Windows. But most people who get introduced and curious enough to explore Linux always take that easy first step there in creating the single partition, just to get their feet wet. And I have several systems that are set that way because they're strictly experimental environments, learning environments for me to pick up this, pick up that, figure out this, figure out that. And I don't have that many I would classify as production.
Well, anyway, what we were saying about Clonezilla having some graphics that go beyond this command line. And for backup, you really need to have an idea of what it's going to do before it does it.
Oh, yeah. I think there's a number of tutorials out there for Clonezilla.
Some of them are clearer than others.
Well, that's due to the time span in which all this stuff has existed. Time changes everything. So you have to try and make sure you get hold of a tutorial, whether it's a printed type one or a video one, that is pretty modern versus something that was created 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago. Because it makes a difference.
Yeah. So like I say, there are many different ways to back up. But before we do our upgrades, we need to make sure we have a backup that will be restorable.
Yeah. Now, see, the backup, not backup, pardon me. The update I did at the beginning of the meeting, I did without any backup.
Right.
It doesn't matter to me because this is a test system. This is experimental. Figuratively speaking, I could take a sledgehammer to it, and who cares? I'll just rebuild it. It takes time, yes, to do that, but I haven't really lost that much if I do it. And in some cases, when I'm rebuilding it, I'll try a few other little odds and ends that I may have picked up here and there, and such as breaking out. I had thought about breaking out the home directory, breaking out things that people put into a swap file. I hadn't heard about the boot file. I hadn't come across the need for the boot file as yet. But generally speaking, there are, like I say, at least 6 to 8 other directories I've seen some break out. I haven't totally understood why. And if I understand why and it makes sense for me, then I might break some additional partitions out. But until you have the need, and this is where breaking out, particularly the home partition, comes important. Let's say that you are trying to do some documents, some spreadsheets, etc., on your Linux system, and I'm assuming you got it up and running.
Yeah.
By having a separate partition for the home directory, you could literally delete the swap file partition and the root partition. The home directory will still be there unless you totally lose the drive, either through mass corruption or the drive just plain failed. Therefore, you can reinstall, and during the reinstall, you use a separate function in the install process, create a new partition for the swap, a new partition for the root. You designate them as such, reinstall the Linux OS, and you're back in business because it'll also recognize your home directory. The only thing you may have to do during that setup process is to clearly identify that partition as the home directory, and it'll say, I'm happy with it. And now all your settings from the original install are there in the home directory. It makes recovering everything much easier, but this does not, under any circumstances, negate the need for backups and the possibility of using time shift, which I've got to explore further myself. Bob? Yeah.
Dennis Leeds in the chat brings up something that I think really needs to be addressed. Okay. He asked about Clonezilla. Is it free? Is it shareware? Is it purchased software? Now, what I want to make a point of is that in Linux, nearly everything that is available, nearly everything you use, there's at least something that you can get that is pure open source. And by this, we mean free. And it's not just free as in beer, as in free trial. It's free, libre, open source. The whole philosophy in Linux is that you take from the community what you need to use, and you contribute back to the community with your code and with your feedback and with your crash reports and everything else, so that the developers have something to chew on at their end. And this is the cooperative relationship. It isn't the business transaction relationship we're used to with Windows software. It's very different.
Yes, and the macro reflect that I use on all my systems is free to use as long as you're not a business, and we're not a business, I don't think. And as long as I don't need the extra features I mentioned of incremental differential backups, being able to restore individual files and folders, if I don't need those, I've got free use of doing whole system backups, and I can do whole system restores or individual partitions. I've done that before, even with Linux that's on a multi-boot, basically Windows system. And that way I have the ability to have some selectivity without wiping out everything. And if I knew I was going to have to wipe out everything for whatever reason, I would try and do a backup anyhow of everything that was out there first, then do the restore that I want to overlay everything with. And at least I've got a backup of what was left out there, and maybe I can salvage some stuff out of that. Okay. Has anybody else got anything offhand?
So anyway, everybody's going to get all up to date on which version they're using.
Well, that's the $64 question here. And I'm not joking when I say that. We have to understand that we have people here that have some experience and different versions of Linux. Bob likes Ubuntu a lot. And,
Not just, but yes.
Yeah, well, yes, you're like me in a smaller sense. I have lots of distros versus only a few.
Yeah. Ubuntu is my home.
Yeah. And at the same time, too, some of you may have, like Donna and her husband have some Linux already installed via another group. That's fine. Mm-hmm. There's no problem with that whatsoever. But for those that don't have it, I would like some information from you. Like I said earlier, an email with your full name and your machine that you're going to try and put Linux on. I, again, strongly recommend not doing a dual boot if you don't already have one. If you got a dual boot, which it sounds like Donna and her husband, Kenneth, have both one dual boot and several independent systems, that's fine too. But I got to hear from you guys too. If you want to try and do an install like the next meeting we have, or do you want to try and get together in a separate meeting where I can try and lead you through making the media, installing it on your target system, and getting it all set up and have the basics kind of like what I've got here on this test system. So that's one of the main things that I've got to have in feedback in order to better have an idea of how to get everybody on the same page, I guess is the best way to put it. Darn it. I'm trying to do something with mouse and it don't work. Well, it's because I'm using the wrong mouse. Okay, Bert Good entered the waiting room. Oh, okay, I didn't spot that. It shows. It doesn't show up on my Windows machine. It showed up on my Linux machine. Believe it or not, and I haven't been looking at it to notice that was the case. Sorry, Bert. All right, Dennis, I see your hand is up. I hope you got some good news.
A couple questions. Oh, well, I'm going to send you an email, Tim, with another computer that I'm going to try to use.
Yeah, he had some real antiques. They would be challenging for me, but at least I can get through them. The ones he had would be a real nightmare for him to do. And he wouldn't be able to use a main Linux distro. He'd have to use one of the extremely light versions.
Yeah. But a couple questions here. Bob was saying that, okay, we can get, a good bit of the Linux software for free. But even, for example, the Clonezilla. So if I want to download some software, how do I know? Because it is free, there may be people who are offering versions out there that are like fake or spam. How do I know what websites has the good stuff and not somebody trying to catch me and give me something bad.
Okay. I use about 4 or 5 different sites, mostly for Windows, but at least a couple of them I can get Linux from. Besides what's built into Linux, if you have a running Linux, okay? If you have a running Linux, which you don't have right now, what Microsoft calls the store is where you'd be going, and that's your package manager that allows you to select various versions of software. Let's see if I can.
Yeah, so maybe if you could give us a list of what these sites are, that'd be great.
Hang on here. I'll put them in the chat as I manage to do so. I got to play with 2 different mice. All right, got something out of my way.
While you're doing that, there are 2 guidelines. One, most of what you'll want is in the repository, in the software package manager.
Yes.
So you're probably going to want to get stuff from there mostly.
What is that?
What? It's part of your It's part of your operating system. It's called the updater or the software center or whatever.
This is a software sources, and it gives you control over where you get your software from. Now, right now, it's defaulted to the United States and the United Kingdom.
Yeah.
That's one of the areas that you have to play with a little bit. Now, the other, let's see if I can get back to it. Software manager.
Yeah, but do be careful online. Don't just randomly download packages.
Yes.
You should know that they've been recommended by things like Linux Magazine or Ask Ubuntu or other reputable sites.
Agree.
And I had a document that included a list of reputable sites and a whole lot of other stuff about Linux, which I shared from my Linux talk to South Suburban.
Yes. If anybody from CCS attended the presentation that Bob did on the South group, I have to dig out my document. I got a copy of it that I could send to everybody.
Or refer them to me. Shoot me an email.
Okay.
I've got the document.
But this is editor's picks here in the software manager. And that's different than the update package manager.
Yeah.
And this is where you install new stuff that's not on your system. Then you come down to categories that contain other options. There's Firefox. It's got a green circle with a check mark. That is meaning it was already installed. If I want Chromium, I click on it. It'll go through the process of downloading and installing it, and it'll put a green circle with a check mark. Thunderbird is installed on here. Whether I use it or not, I could remove it if I wish to. But this is a test system, so why get bent out of shape? That's the thing. With computers, you better have patience and a good deal of persistence, because when you hit the brick wall, persistence is what's going to keep you driving to get a resolution or a workaround, whatever your problem is. The problems are always going to be there. Life is constantly challenging you one way or another. So quit trying to avoid it. As you can see, there's quite a number of programs out there, and it gives you a rating in stars. And but when you start getting down towards the bottom, wherever that is, you start losing a lot of stars in some of the categories. Some of them will have a whole lot of no star situations. Let's see if I don't get into games much. I know what I'm looking for, but I don't remember the category. But I came across one category one time, just cruising through, and I saw a bunch of no rating whatsoever in the software. Another source that I have in mind that I take and get a fair amount of software, and they even have one folder for Linux, is majorgeeks.com.
Yeah, they have some stuff.
Yeah, and that's one of my major ones when I have to go outside of Linux to get something that I know will work in Linux, or that I can use kind of like Macro Reflect with a recovery drive from Windows. I can run it on a Linux system. I forgot about that. And I don't generally do it that often because most of my Linuxes are on systems with Windows. So I just back up the whole thing from Windows and I'm done. Donna, I see your hand up.
Yes, I don't have the email address to write to you, and I don't have, so you're Tim, and the other gentleman was Bob with software or something? I don't have these
Let me put
email
something
address.
in. Let me put something in.
In chat? Okay, thank you.
Get it?
Yeah, I see it, okay.
And then Tim can put his in if he wants.
No, I'd rather be anonymous.
Okay. You slipped.
Yeah. I've slipped a lot of discs.
You slipped right in there.
At any rate, generally speaking, Linux is quite powerful. It gives you a completely different perspective. And if you get adventurous like I have, and a little bit Bob that I know of, and you start playing with some of the other distros, there's at least 600 out there. And but most of them are based on no more than 24 base Linux distributions like Debian for Ubuntu and Mint. And you have maybe 18 to 24 desktops out there that you can play with. Basically speaking, you take a Linux distro that you find that you really like the way it works, the way it's set up and everything else in that, and you can customize this thing until you pass away. And if you really think it's the cat's meow, you can package it up and offer it to other Linux people that take a look at, and maybe some of them will like it and use it. That's how you get so many different variations. This is unlike Windows and Mac, the ability to have an OS that has tremendous flexibility and modularity. And there are users out there of Linux that use Gentoo and Linux from scratch, where they take source code only and they roll their own version of Linux out of it. I think that's pretty bold, and I sure ain't going there. I hope that answers a bit of your question.
I have a question.
Yes, Wayne.
Yeah, I've talked with you, a number of times or discussed with you over the internet, and I've got a bare 250-bit or gigabyte hard drive SSD that I'm going to put into my computer.
Okay.
So what do I do now? I have to download this distro on my other computer, on my Windows computer,
Yes.
onto like a USB.
Yes. You put the Linux on. That's what I'm coming up to, and that we've got to decide how we're going to do it. Do we create another interim meeting just to do an install with the newbies, or do we wait until the next meeting of this group, which right now, if it stays the same, will be the fourth Tuesday, and go through the install there? But basically, you got to have Rufus, excuse me, not Roofy. That's the wrong thing. Rufus, you have to have a flash drive, and you have to have a copy of the Mint 20.2 version of Linux. If, like Donna and Kenneth, have an earlier version, don't worry about it. The one nice thing, they came out with rolling distros and LTS versions, long-term service, which is about 5 years. And basically speaking, when you go through the updates like I did at the beginning of the meeting, basically speaking, you're getting all the same updates to the current version you have on your machine, and it's all up to date, as though you still had the 20.2 version. So you won't notice any physical differences that I'm aware of so far. So generally speaking, Donna and Kenneth, I wouldn't worry about your distro as long as you're doing the updates.
Yeah, Mint tends to emphasize being on the current version more so than Ubuntu.
But I understand that. But if you're doing the update, you are up to date with the current version. You don't have to keep downloading and upgrading, which I'll bring this up mostly for edification. And I'm not expecting any of you to do it. Before there were the graphical package managers to help you update your systems and install software, you came in, oops, wrong keyboard again.
Okay.
Now, this one changes a little bit. It used to be you did app dash
Get.
get. The dash get isn't necessary in more modern versions. Mint 20.2 and some earlier versions. And then I do an update, which updates the catalog of what's available out there as
No
the
doubt.
current image. Pardon? I heard somebody's voice. All right. That's updating a catalog of what the current image is. If I take also and do sudo, and it remembers the password for a period of time, I think about 15 minutes. I do an apt upgrade. It will find all the packages that changed between what you have right now and what came in that catalog, and update only those items that actually did change. However, there's a third one, and I'll put this out there, and I don't expect Donna and Kenneth to use it, but this is for edification purposes. If I do a sudo Boy, I got used to this setup. I'm not going to execute this, but if I did, and I was on 20.0 or 20.1, this is what I would run to upgrade it absolutely to 20.2.
No, that's not true. It won't do that.
It used to.
That's not the command for it. Dist upgrade will only show if a particular software package has a distribution upgrade within your version. You will not be upgrading your version to the next version. That requires an entirely different sequence.
Okay. Offhand, it did do it this way in the past. Sorry. I know that for a fact.
Yeah, it may have done it in the past,
Yeah.
but yes, you may get some things that will upgrade that way that don't upgrade through the other two commands. But you will not handle, it will not handle an upgrade from, say, 2004 to 2010 if you were going with the Ubuntu numbering.
Okay.
Or 20.1 to 20.2. However, if there's a .04.1 and a .04.2, it will probably take you up to the .2.
Yeah, it's
that second dot.
Yeah, well, see, the bad part is, like all software, including Windows, Mac, etc., this stuff is constantly under evolution, and therefore rules change witut everybody knowing about it. And so what used to work even for me, maybe he's correct and it doesn't. By the way, if I want to repeat one of these commands I typed in, just do an up arrow and I can sequence through them, and it gives me the ability not to have to type over and over again same or similar command. And now that I stop, I can use the backspace key or the left arrow key to move the cursor where I want it, and I can then modify it any way I need to. And this is the same also on Windows and Mac. So it's this is where things are kind of meshing together in a lot of the features. This is what's got Mac users real ticked off with Windows 11. And because they see in Windows 11 them stealing a lot of various layouts and so forth in look and feel area of the operating system from the Mac OS. And that's got them ticked off. It just shows how flexible the operating systems can be when they want to be. And that's the main key. Linux has always been pretty darn flexible unless you go back to the Stone Age, like before 2000. After 2000, it started to become very easy. When you go back far enough, if a newbie was interested in Linux and they wanted to get on a forum to ask questions, get guidance and answers, a lot of times they got flamed. What does flame mean? Somebody wrote a response in capital letters, basically yelling at the newbie that posted the question or problem that they were having. And usually it had to do with reading the manual. I've gone through the manuals. Now, this was a lot of years ago. I hope they improved some, but generally speaking, they're a bit rough. And back then, they were more than a little bit rough. You had to be have a couple heads on your shoulders in order to try and figure out what they meant by certain commands. And that's really what the manuals are telling you. The various commands that are available and the options that are available. And that has changed a lot. Almost everything in the past, option switches started off with double hyphens. Then they went to single hyphens. And but if you wanted to use a double hyphen, you could still use that. Everything is evolving. So what we learn today changes tomorrow, and you got to live with that.
Okay, so Tim, I posted in chat what the actual command sequence is if you want to upgrade, at least in Ubuntu, from one version to the next. There's a several step process.
Okay. I'll take a look at that.
Mint may be different.
Yeah, well, it shouldn't be. Basically speaking, Mint is based upon Ubuntu. Ubuntu is based upon Debian. Ubuntu makes a polished version of Debian, which can be very stodgy and clunky and very slow at times, too, depending on the horsepower of your machine. Mm-hmm. Then Mint takes Ubuntu and adds further refinements and polish to it that newbies find easier to deal with and understand than Ubuntu.
Yeah, what I'm saying is the exact way you would enter, or even if you'd even use the command line, will differ in Mint.
Yes.
I think the upgrade does not need the command line in Mint.
I don't remember offhand. That's something I'd have to look into. Donna, you got another question?
Yes, I do. Yes, I do. When we did our Linux install with Cinnamon Mint, we used Etcher. I don't know what Rufus is. Is that another?
It's
something.
It's very
like
similar
that?
to Etcher. Etcher I've used too. There's several other ones as well. Rufus gives you the ability to take an ISO and make a bootable USB drive, but it has some added features for Windows users. I can download old distros of Windows and put them out on a USB drive to boot up an old system that has Windows in it. So it has a little bit more flexibility. Both of them are basically doing the same thing, but Rufus shows you a menu of options that don't exist in Etcher. Etcher is pure, plain and simple. Here's your source. Here's where you want to put it on and burn it. Whereas with Rufus, you have to make some various choices, not too many usually. In most cases, if you've got the ISO downloaded, you just point it to that ISO image, say this is the one I want, and usually you don't have to change anything else and just burn it.
And also Rufus does have some presets for some of the more popular Linux distros.
Yes.
All
So
right.
you don't have to go search for them.
So I don't know if you've decided what you're going to do for installing, but Ken and I would attend another install and just see how Rufus works. I mean,
That's right.
we had trouble with this Etcher. So Ken has an old Toshiba laptop, and
Right.
he had a lot of problems. So it was a number of installs before he ever got it in. He had tremendous problems. So
Well, for
we wouldn't mind
newbies,
watching again.
yeah, but for newbies, that's the thing. You had a challenge in front of you to get it installed correctly and running, and you took the challenge by the horns, and you beat it. And with that's persistence. If you don't have persistence, don't get a computer, especially also if you don't have patience. I've actually seen somebody get so ticked off with their machine, they punched it out. I mean, just right through the screen.
Yeah, By the way, Tim and everybody, it sounds to me like we've got enough interest in having a separate breakout session or maybe a series of them to get people installed and get people started. Do we want to take maybe a poll or a vote?
I think it would be probably the best idea to get people up. If we can, right now, it would have to be in the second week of August, either Tuesday or Thursday night.
So is there any interest in that?
Well, second Tuesday works for us.
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay. Yeah, that's fine. I'll send out a message, and I got to set it up with Jerry anyhow. He runs our Zoom meetings, except for one.
Yeah.
And generally speaking, this will we'll put that on the calendar. I think second Tuesday is the 10th, if I remember right.
Yeah, we can get a sign-up list and see how much interest we're getting, and I pass word along to CCS head office.
Yeah, I am the head office.
Yeah, anybody at the head office. Anybody. Yourself, Jerry? Well, Jerry's not head office, but he sets these things up.
For those of you who aren't part of CCS, I'm the president of CCS.
Yeah.
All right.
Just as long as people know what we're trying to do.
And I know, Don, I've seen you on several of the APCUG webinars, if I'm correct.
Yes, Ken and I have been trying to attend and learn. This is the first time we've been home in 7 years, and there's a whole lot that's happened, obviously Linux, that we know nothing about.
You got something to be happy about the pandemic about. You got to stay home.
Well, we haven't finished all our projects that we have here yet. We
You know,
still
the
have
good-
projects. We've been home over a year and a half, and we still have projects that aren't done.
Yeah, well, me too.
Okay.
Yep. I still have a sewing machine I haven't set up.
Anyway, it's fun to learn new things, and because our computers are all old, none of them will update to Windows 11.
I've got an old 46 laptop. It has a floppy drive, and a hard drive. It has no optical drive. It has no USB ports. One of these days, I'll get around to trying to put a featherweight Linux distro on it to see what happens.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, the older computers are going to end up as Linux. I'm going to have to get a new computer for Windows 11, but I want to find out what the requirements are in the release to manufacture before I'm even going to think about it.
Well, at the moment, I just read something today briefly, so I didn't read the whole details. It sounds like they're going to hold to the list of requirements of the dual core, 4 gigs of memory, 64 gigs of storage, and the TPM2. But I've got TPM1 on this machine, but the version of 11 I've got on here from the insiders is not enforcing these new standards.
That's insider only. Once they release to manufacture, it won't even install on a Skylake or Kaby Lake.
Right.
Maybe they'll bend a little on Kaby Lake.
That's the other thing that maybe I should bring up right now. And that has to do with distros installation on old equipment. There are 2 different versions of partitioning. In modern machines, including Windows 10, I think even 8, you have GPT partitioning, and it's also in 11. In OSs in Windows, prior to that, you have MBR partitioning. That means you can only have 4 primary partitions or 3 primary and an extended partition where you can have 1 or more logical partitions within the extended partition. So it makes things a real lot of fun because you have to play a few games between the 2 environments. I know I've got both environments. Dennis? before you fall.
I wanted to, so the version that you wanted to get us going on, Tim, for the newbies was this mint cinnamon. But I wanted to have maybe Bob, who says he likes this Ubuntu. Bob, are you able to give us like maybe one or two things that you think are better in Ubuntu than in Mint, and one or two major things that you don't like in Mint that you have in Ubuntu?
Well, let me just put it this way. It is kind of like the difference between a Windows 10 home user or a Windows 10 Pro user. Pro users like to have extra features that may not be available or may not be as easy to implement in the home edition. Mint is excellent for beginners. It's simple, easy, and should have a fairly familiar interface. And Ubuntu, you can do more things with it, but they tend to be more advanced things.
Yes.
Ubuntu is used often on servers, which you would not do with Mint. And Ubuntu, let's say it has a power user group of features. And only people like me who are power users really will use these esoteric things you can do. But I think Cinnamon Mint would probably serve the purposes of 90% of anybody who wants to use Linux, just as Home will serve the purposes of 90% of people who use Windows.
Also, since we have so many newbies in here at the moment, it's a case where it's best to be on the same page, as it were. Therefore, being on Mint or being able to be versed like myself and Bob on other distros, that's one thing. You're not there as a newbie. Therefore, if you go with a different distro, you may have some issues that we have to take like a side trip in order to help answer some of those problems for you, versus everybody learning the same thing because they're on basically the same distro.
Yeah, it keeps things simple both for you, the users, and us, the users, and also for those of us who are functioning a little bit more in a leadership role.
Okay. All right. Now, what I'll do then, because we're near the end of our regular time, and I don't see a need to go past the 9:30 quit time, is to try and answer any last minute questions, etc. And I'll try and make up a meeting on, I'm pretty sure it's August the 10th. And that way, the whole meeting will be, I got to have every one of you ready to go with a machine you're going to install on, have a flash drive that's at least 8 minimum, but I prefer 16 because it gives me more flexibility in things I may want to do later on. And this is where Rufus also comes in. Rufus, on the USB drive you create, can have persistent read-write storage. With a 16 gig drive, depending on the size of the distro you're installing on the USB drive, you may have as much as 10 gigs that you can assign to persistent storage, where you can download updates to that apply to that distro on the drive. You can also download programs and install them and run right from the USB drive. But I don't do that on most of my USB drives. I only put the ISO image out there. That's it. And I install it on regular computer installations. And I only use that one feature sparingly. There's lots of other tricks. I mean, you can also take and use Yummy YUMI. It when it is installed on a USB drive, allows you to install many versions of OSs and not just Linux. You can put other OSs on there as well, and depending on how much storage is on that drive. Like if you get a 128 gigabyte drive, you can put a whole bunch of different distros out on that drive. When you boot to that USB drive, you have an issue of selecting which version of OS do you want to run. Kind of like a grub menu, which you guys haven't seen yet. Couldn't think of it. If I get the chance on this machine here, the test system that I had showing that I might install another small OS of Linux on it so that it has a grub menu. But I don't think I can share that directly with you. And I have to pick up my camera and point it at the screen for you.
Tim, there might be a way to do that. I have Grub Customizer, which will show the list.
Ah, okay.
Let me pull up Grub Customizer.
I got to make you a co-host.
Just a moment.
Give me a second.
That would work too. It's just a case where when you have multiple OSs, like in Donna and Kevin's.
This will show. This will show that.
Hold on.
Now, let me see whether I can do any sharing.
Hold on.
Click on share.
Hold on. It should be
Okay,
now.
I'm co-hosting. And now I am going to see if I have a screen share that'll let me do this. Okay. Yes. Share.
There we go.
Got it?
Okay.
That's your Grub manual. Mine is big and thick and heavy because I have detritus from about 3 or 4 years of a long-term stability release.
Yeah, the basically it's a menu list of different distros out there, and usually they give you a secondary menu entry for advanced features, which you might have to dip into if running the regular distro runs into problems on the hardware you're trying to run it on. Such as video drivers, such as your other internal features that may cause the regular distro a problem. Recovery mode is another one. Sometimes Linux distros installed run into problems just like Windows. And like Windows, you have a recovery mode that you have to get into and see if it can fix itself.
Yeah, you can boot into previous kernels. The current one is 11, although actually there's a 13 OEM, but that's experimental, what we call an upstream kernel. And I go all the way back to 5.4, which is the basic kernel. And it also shows the Ubuntu thing is going to be the extra options, and Windows, because I have a dual boot, Windows is listed as an option, and you can go into the UEFI firmware,
right,
in case you need to reset something.
And see, the recovery mode too is there in part because during that update, there was a kernel update that I did. Now, sometimes it doesn't work on every machine, kind of like Windows updates and upgrades. So what you have to do is be able to back off under the advanced features, and you can usually go through several different levels of kernels until you get one that works right. And that'll reinstall that kernel, and you should be okay. It's just a case where this happens with drivers, even in Windows. Sometimes you get a bad driver update. You got to back it out. And when you back it out, it falls back to whatever it last had that worked.
Yeah, in Linux, sometimes drivers will be taken out of the kernel, and it will be expected that the software will provide it, or that the shell level will provide it. And these are higher levels. That's called regression. And I have seen regression in kernels since 5.8, and it's been pretty bad. And it's the same problem that Wayland is taking features out of the compositor and shoving them into the shell. So you need new shell extensions. That is also regression. And it's a really bad thing that they're doing. It assumes you're getting the latest, greatest of everything, constantly upgrading your hardware. And I wish they wouldn't do it, but this is why we have older kernels.
Yeah, and it's a lifesaver. And I'm not joking when I say that. It's not a joke.
Yeah.
It's a real lifesaver, because all of a sudden you got a system that won't work. And
yeah, like I lost my sound, or I lost my SD card reader, or something like that.
Yeah, and so being able to go back to older kernel versions gives you the ability to operate again.
Okay, so that's what that looks like.
Yeah, it's a different little animal, and until you see it, you just have to try and use your imagination what it looks like. And by the way, from one distro to another, the grub menu can look quite a bit different. Functionality-wise, it's pretty much the same. So basically all that means is whoever created that distro customized the grub configuration kind of usually to denote themselves. And they always put a new distro install as the first one on the menu. Then everything else that already was there underneath it, which can be a little maddening when you got a lot of distros on your system, like I have on a couple of my systems.
And that is why Grub Customizer and other things like it exist. So you can rearrange the menu. Yeah. And so you can rearrange some other things and make the graphics better and easier to read.
I'm just getting into playing with that.
So I do a lot of customizing of that, so that the first thing I see, I will know what I'm looking at.
It's more fun the other way. Yeah?
Okay. So that's my final word.
Kim?
Yeah.
Can we get a list of the files and the locations to download from of everything we're going to need for the meeting? Before
I can dig out that information, and I got to create a email for everybody that's on my list, and I hope there's a few new names that I can come up with the email addresses of and put them in my contact list, and that way I already did a email already. I sent it out a couple times to people that asked for machine information, and also provided information about Rufus and where to get the Mint 20.2 download.
I'm currently downloading on a side, and it's 20.2 Mint, because that's what we're going to go with. And
yeah.
It's a long downloader.
Oh, yeah. Well, it ain't tiny. I mean, you're talking several gigabytes. I think it's 2 something.
It's smaller than Windows.
Yeah. About 3/5, maybe.
About a half, 3/5.
Yeah. Anyway.
So when you download it to your hard drive, then copy it to a USB?
Well, in a manner of speaking, yes, but it's not a copy.
No, it's a burn. It's an ISO burn,
Yeah, it's
just like the old CDs.
It's kind of like burning a CD or a DVD, but it's going to the USB drive, but it's doing the same basic function that you did on CDs and DVDs. Whereas with the USB, like I say, with the Rufus tool, if you wanted to keep that USB drive for a long time, you might add persistence storage on it. You can then periodically update that distro right on the USB drive, and sometimes install other software and run it off of that. But it's got its ups and downs on doing that, because when you download, and I didn't show you this, I didn't think of it at the time. There's in the command line, if you go sudo apt clean, it removes a lot of the stuff from the various updates.
Clean or auto remove?
Clean is what I've been using. There is an auto remove also, but I think that handles stuff that's in limbo. In other words, I used to use this library. Now it's no longer used. They use a different library. Auto remove takes out the other library.
Okay.
That isn't being used. The clean kind of like gets rid of the download crap that even Windows has from all the updates. There are some tools available in command, as well as graphical tools in Windows that will do a cleanup of that stuff quite well. Usually you notice the majority of it in the WinSXS folder under a Windows main folder. And that keeps growing and growing and growing. And once or twice a year, you need to do a proper cleanup of that. You can't do it manually. You've got to use either the command line tools that I know, or you use some of the graphical tools. And the ones I'm using are free anyhow to use, and they'll clean up a lot of that crap. On the Windows systems that I've used the graphical tools on, I can see how much it cleaned up, and we're talking several gigabytes of space. And for people who are complaining they're running out of space, how do I get more space? Well, that's basically how you do it, or you do it Al Cheeks' way. And he backs up all of his data. He knows what programs he installs on his system. Maybe he has a copy in advance of the new software. Then he blows everything away, reinstalls Windows from scratch, gets all the updates, reinstalls all the programs, put a copy of his data back on the system, and he's ready to go again. But that can, depending on the horsepower of your computer, take anywhere between 3/4 of a day to 2 days to get that accomplished. I've got some old, slow systems. If I can get it done in 2 days, I'm doing real good. Sometimes that's a chore to achieve that.
With my Linux, if I have to do that sort of thing, it'll usually put itself back together within about a couple or 3 hours.
Yeah, it depends on technique and whether you're breaking things out or not, etc. And that's something we got to get into further as we go down the line.
Okay.
One thing one of you guys said about 20 minutes ago, all of a sudden rang a bell with me. This new computer I was going to tell you I want to try to use, Tim. I remember reading it, and I wrote it down here because I got some specs. It has an i5 processor.
Good.
KB Lake label, and that didn't mean anything to me. But 20 minutes ago, one of you guys said KB Lake label. What does that mean? Does that mean
7th gen? Generally 7th gen Intel.
Yeah.
Is that a problem? Is that a problem?
It might be a problem for Windows 11, but it won't be a problem for Linux.
Okay,
It
good.
won't be a problem for Windows 10 all the way back to when God created the earth. I mean, Linux supposedly has at least one version that'll go back to a 46 computer.
Okay.
I have one or two laying around. I don't expect much out of them. The memory was small. In fact, that laptop I mentioned earlier, that sucker has only got, I think, 24 megabytes of memory. And I think that Linux distro required 64. And it's physically impossible to change that physical parameter.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know what will happen.
Yeah, KB Lake is just fine for everything. It may eventually even be fine for Windows 11, but right now it's not.
Right. If you got the Insider's distro that I'm playing with, it would load and run on that system because they're not enforcing their new requirements. But as soon as, like he said, they take and release to manufacture Windows 11, all bets are off on what will and what will not work. But
we will find out, to be continued.
Yeah. Right now, supposedly almost all Intel and maybe it applies to Ryzen too. I know it does on part of them. That if you got an 8th, 9th, 10th, or 11th generation Intel chip, it is in compliance. They're looking at 7 to see if they can make that compliant. Anything older probably is not going to fly. Now, except for maybe a system like this. This is an old desktop. You pull out one plug and then you buy another plug and you plug it in, and damn well might work. And this is a Core 2 quad. But you don't know until you experiment.
Yep, to be continued.
Yeah. Anything else?
Tim,
For when you're running Rufus, can you partition the hard drive before you install so you could leave a
Yes,
sector out?
If you know what you're doing, yes, you can. But you have to have a partitioning tool, preferably like G-Parted. There is a standalone version. It can be installed on a flash drive that's bootable, and it would allow you to go in and do the partitioning. The one that's built into the ISO installer is G-Parted, but it's more primitive and a little clunkier to use than a regular modern G-Parted.
Yeah, it's basically the old part image.
Yeah. With a little bit of graphics, and that's about it.
Tiny bit.
Yeah, tiny bit.
Problem is that the machine I'm going to put it on is a Windows 7, and it's got one big partition, and it's 500 gig.
Well, that's because that's an old MBR partition. It didn't have GPT partitioning.
Yeah.
It didn't have UEFI. So on that drive, the most you can have is 4 primary, which is what we have on this test system here. Or you can have 3 primary, 1 extended, and in the extended, you can have 1 or more logical partitions.
And also, Linux can install to a logical partition.
Right.
It doesn't have to be primary.
That's right.
Absolutely. Well, I don't want to leave the 7 on there anyway. I want to wipe everything down. But I do want to have 2 partitions in left.
Well, the way I'm going to do it is I'm going to have a separate partition for the swap drive, the root drive, and home. I know we don't need boot partition.
No.
And the other ones I know about. I haven't read up enough to understand why some of them were doing it. It has to do with various settings in many instances or preferences of pieces of software individuals had on their system.
That's Windows System Reserved.
Yeah, but I mean,
That's important.
well, it's just a case where some of them broke out like VAR.
Oh,
And
in Linux, it's absolutely not necessary.
well, some think it is.
It helps sometimes. It depends on how you're using it.
That's why I'm saying it has the way they have theirs set up and the software they're running. I guess it's a benefit to them. For the
they wouldn't do it if it weren't helping them.
And the rest of us probably don't need it.
Mere mortals do not need it.
Yeah. All right.
Big business, maybe.
Jim, I have one question for you.
Why?
The 3 members that are not CCS members, how did they get the link? Did it go out with everyone that Beata put in, or did you send them out separately?
I have a separate list that I keep of everybody that I know about so far. There were 3 people at least tonight. Jeff Glassman is one of them. If I get his email address or it's in the chat, etc.
It's in the chat.
That's fine. I'll add them to my list.
Okay.
And anybody that's in this first session will get emails and a direct announcement rather than the general announcement we sent to all of CCS.
Okay. I was just curious how you were doing it.
So it's not a major issue. I keep a list of the board, and I keep a list of CCS leaders too.
Okay. No problem.
All right. Anything else?
So would it help if I've got a disk cloner? It will also wipe the drive. Would that help if I wipe that drive to get all the junk off of it?
No, actually, when you do an install of the ISO or you use the partitioners separately, you can blow everything away right then and there. Unless there's something on it that you want to keep. If there is, then I would clone it. If there's nothing on that drive you want, don't even think about it.
No, there's nothing that I want on there.
That's
I want to
fine.
get everything off of it.
I guarantee it'll take care of itself if you go along with me.
Okay.
And I mean, I might take your idea a step further and include in the software a download of the G-parted, and we might start off with that because that version is a hell of a lot better and easier to use than the one that's in the ISOs.
Okay.
Well, that was why I had raised my hand, is that I thought, what facts do we need to know to use G-parted, and that maybe I will just do a brand new install on my laptop.
That's fine.
With it.
I will be sending out. I've got you and Ken on the list already. And what we'll be doing is I'll be sending out an email of, since it's already been requested, some of the past information I've asked some of the other newbies, which includes also 2 pieces of software to download. I probably will add the G-parted as a download also. And then when we get together, we'll use the G-parted first and set up the drive on the target machine, and then we'll use the Mint distro to walk over the G-parted on the flash drive, and then install it.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
All right. Are we all good?